What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Monty's Minute, episode 8 for November 7th, 2012. I'm Gary Gannon, of course, you're watching Gamebreaker TV. Joining me, as always, the man who answers your questions, Mr. Monty Sharma. How are you, sir?
I'm fabulous, Gary. How you doing, man?
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Really quickly, this episode of Monty's Minute is brought to you by Rift. Go over to riftgame.com for more information on their upcoming expansion, Storm Legion. And we are also going to be giving away 10 copies of Storm Legion all throughout November. All you got to do is go over to gamebreaker.tv/giveaway. Super easy URL, gamebreaker.tv/giveaway. You can go back every single day to enter. These are full retail keys with not only the Storm Legion expansion, also the core game, so don't miss that. All right, sir, we are back for another week of questions. Let's see what we got this week. First up from Mark Daniel. Mark says, first of all, hello, Monty and Gary. Thanks for bringing us this show. And I say thanks for watching this show.
Yeah. What else would we do without them?
Exactly. That's what I always say when they thank me. I'm always like, but thank you, because you wouldn't keep doing the show if you didn't watch. His question, he says, my question this week is about full-time employment / career. Is there really such a thing when it comes to those in the gaming industry? I say that and think of all the layoffs and terminations companies like Blizzard and BioWare and others do. So how do you have a full-time career as a programmer in gaming for Blizzard, as an example, if they can just ditch you after the game is out? Thanks for reading. Kind regards, Mark Daniels. What do you think? It sounds a little bit hesitant about getting into the industry.
No, look, this is, the dark truth, the dark underbelly of the industry. And it's in several ways. This is a big question, so we'll take some time. We'll explore it. Yeah, I was at GDC Online a little while ago in Austin, and I was having drinks with a couple of friends who, in the last 3-4 years, they had worked between them at 6 or 7 different companies, and these were bright, talented people who knew what they were doing, and actually both of these guys were single at the time. So not only did they work at 6 companies, but they worked at 6 companies in 4 different locations, including, one guy going to Germany, Australia, the UK, just a massive amount of movement. So it sort of comes down to this. The sad truth about studios is eventually just about every studio hits we've hired too many people, the game's not right, the latest launch didn't work, or there's massive incompetence from senior management. Anything like that in the studio ends up running mass layoffs. On top of that, there's sort of seasonal layoffs. So EA is always famous for, in Q4 in the fall, they cut QA staff because they've tested all their games that they're going to launch at Christmas. They don't need as large of a QA team, so they cut them all. So, some of these things they're tough. The business is hard, and people get cut. I will tell you in all honesty, so I live in the Boston area. In high tech in general, we have a high turnover rate. You see people who've been at a company for 2-3 years, and they've moved on to another one for a couple of years, and another one for a couple of years. Industries, you look at that and say, hey, that's a problem person. In tech and in gaming, it's like, that's all right, let's evaluate the person as they are. Because we are in a volatile industry, and it comes down to sort of your core skill set and who you are. And,
I think it's becoming more and more like, my background is in television, and when I was in the television, it's even crazier in television because you pretty much get hired for sometimes seasons if you're lucky, sometimes episodes. So, let's just say the average, let's say somebody working in say post-production editing, which is what I was doing for a long time, was you'd get hired on for say 10 episodes. That's it. You didn't know where your next job was, and it was actually. for a lot of people, that's actually a really hard career to have, or you don't think of it as a career, but it absolutely is a career. But I think you definitely also have to have the right mindset to be able to bend and not really know where your next paycheck is coming from sometimes.
Exactly.
Do you think the gaming industry is getting more like that? I mean, I don't think it's going to go down to 10 episodes, because 10 episodes could have been like, 2-3 months at a time. It was like you got a new job.
Right. Well, no, I mean, for some of the mobile games, you might see somebody who's a sound engineer who gets pulled into a job for 2-3 months. And your game's not going to have awesome sound design if you do that, but you can see that sort of thing happening. So I think there's a lot of parallels there. That at the end of the day, and I think this is broader in technology as well as games, you end up, your career is taking care of yourself. Yes. It's building the network.
The mindset is almost like having your own company, right? Like you're like, I work for myself. This is what I do. This is my business. That's I think that's a really smart way to look at it, even the gaming tech industry.
Yeah, well, I mean, Gary Inc., right? You do all sorts of cool stuff, and you've adapted from film and television to what you're doing now, to being a host. To your background is way cooler than my background.
I don't know about that. Well, someday we'll talk about DSL, but not today.
Yeah. But all that sort of stuff. I know a lot about DSL, by the way.
I know, that's why I brought it up.
CTO of the phone company. So
I know, that's why I brought it up. So it's pretty crazy, because you were there at the beginning. I think more and more that students out there and people getting into the industry have to have a little bit more of that mindset. Is that I don't know if it seems like a career these days isn't necessarily like, I'm going to spend the next 30 years at a company. Right. Like if you're getting into gaming, I don't think you should have that mindset. I think the longest term you should probably be looking at is that, I'm going to go work for this company and we'll ship, and then I'll go somewhere else.
And then we'll see.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, I'll honestly say that the biggest regrets in my life were not leaving something sooner. And that's happened to me a few times in my career where I end up doing something different. And it's like, wow, I wish I had done this a long time ago, because change is good. I'm having fun, all that sort of thing. Have you
always found more opportunity that way?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, an old boss of mine used to have a mantra of out and up. You leave where you are and you move up a level, and that's how you go. It's a friend of mine left a great job as a associate producer, because that company was not going to need a full producer for the next 1.5 to 2 years. So he left. He got a job as a producer somewhere. That's what he wanted. He moved his career forward, had fun.
And again, I'll use TV, same thing. But I've got friends here in LA who kind of fall into the same rut, and they start producing at a network, and they've been there for years, or they're an editor, and they're new. And a lot of people would come to me and be like, how do I up my rates? Like, how do I start making more money? And I would tell them all the same thing. And they're like, what? I'd be like, leave, go get more jobs. Yeah. Like, that is the secret. Like, just as fast as you can get in, get out, and raise your rates. Go somewhere else, put it on your resume, raise your rate. Go somewhere else, raise your rate. So it works.
Yeah. The tough thing in games right now, though, is you've got the advantage of you're in LA. Right. So you can move from job to job to job. And there's, I think you could switch jobs every month and not run out of TV and movie production companies.
Absolutely. Right? And that's the thing. And I was willing to make the move. I moved 3,000 miles here because of exactly that. So you have to also be that hungry and that willing to kind of uproot your life. And you talk a lot on this show about your location. It's part of it, right? You need to move to a location where you've got some more gaming companies that you can move into, and then also the willingness to just jump up and go to the next one somewhere else and be applying for things in other states.
And to move it, I have long held a belief, and hopefully in the next 5-10 years it'll be closer, better, that we do better at remote employees. And then you've got the luxury of, you can live in some beautiful place where your family is, but you can still work for gaming companies all over the world. And, hopefully we'll see more of that stuff. But until then, it is, you want to move to where there's a cluster of companies and focus on your brand. Always be learning, always be in touch with people. Don't be insulated and sit in a company like, I know senior programmers in places who've been there since the company started and will probably be the last guy out the door. But they're smart enough to stay in close contact with all sorts of people and keep their skills sharp, because every now and then the company takes a turn you might not like.
Mm-hmm.
A new exec comes in, or the project just isn't thrilling anymore. Like, all right, I've solved this damn problem, how many times? Want to go do something else. And change is good.
Do you see that some of the companies out there have completely different, not methodologies, but sort of internal structure that is very different between? Do some of the bigger companies, like I don't even know who to think of, but some of the big, larger MMO companies in general that clean house very often, and some of them, I mean, like an SOE, for instance. I think a lot of the SOE employees have been there for quite a while, and they move from project to project. So you see some companies, I think, that do have a fairly large group of people that stay within the infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Do you see that is it like a mixture between just how the company is run? Do some of them just clean house and want fresh blood all the time?
Yeah. I mean, Microsoft used to get nailed for that because, they had this thing of the bottom 10% of performers got cut every year. Well, you might be cutting, at some point in time, some really talented people, but somebody's got to be in the bottom 10%.
Right.
You also have some producers and some execs who have either they've bid a project wrong, and sometime, we should do a whole show on how games get financed, because that actually underpins so much of what we're talking about. But, they bid a game wrong, so the feature set they have to deliver does not fit into the time and the staff that they have to deliver it in. So they've got a team who's crunching for 3, 4, 6 months. That just burns people out. And people in that environment, they get to the end and it's a creative thing and they're good, honorable people. But at the end of it, they just want to get the hell out. And so, companies like that will churn staff at a higher rate. You'll see the young blood come in, get burned and burned and burned, and if they're lucky enough to end up in a relationship or have kids, you'll see them bolt out the door, because you can't live like that.
So what do you think Mark does then? He's got this, he's got this dilemma where he wants to think about becoming a programmer for a company like, let's say, aspirations of Blizzard. Do you think he just needs to get over the mental hurdle of thinking a career is 30 years and maybe shorten that time frame?
If you're going to work for a large studio, having a career that's 5 years long, maybe even 10 years long, is entirely possible. All right, so it's the indies and the smaller developers that go through a lot more churn. Even then, in a large studio, expect that you got put on a new title that they're working on. Great, new title, awesome, cool. You join up on that new title, and they get a year into it, and it's like, boy, this sucks. They're going to try and absorb, a percentage of that team on other projects, so they'll pull the best out. And so it never hurts to be the best. But then they're going to cut. And what we've seen, so Massachusetts has gone through, a couple of studios shutting down and downsizing late. And what we've seen is actually new studios pop up because of that. So somebody who was an associate producer or somebody who was a creative lead steps up and says, hey, guys, I've got an idea. Let's go do this. And, everybody pitch in for, a few weeks. Let's get some concept art done and a thing, and let's shop it around and see if we can't get it funded. And so a lot of times when you see things like this, it's actually good for the industry if people are able to stay locally and they form their own little clusters.
All right, next up, this one from Simo H from Finland. He says, here's a question for the show. Big game franchises are a way for studios to reduce uncertainty of success and achieve more stability of income. He says, season passes are a new revenue model for retail games that strangely started rising about the same time when MMO subscription models started failing. Also, consoles have their subscription fees for Gold and Plus memberships. It's a really good question. It says, why is the revenue model on the rise on packaged games while it declines on MMOs?
Yeah. So the real question there is who's changing what their business model how, right? So we've talked a lot about free to play, and that's when the game developers putting the game forward and they're saying, okay, we're going to get rid of subscription fees because we're going to cut our marketing cost and we're going to drive that. When you see things like Season Pass and what was the Call of Duty Elite? That stupid
Yeah, Call of
thing?
Duty Elite had the extra website videos. And
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
I didn't say that stupid thing. That marketing error. There's a company who accounting god awful, boring stuff sometimes, but how you recognize revenue, how you get to say when you actually made money, matters because when you report to the stock market, that impacts your stock price. So, I just heard a thing today that the PR and advertising firms that worked on the election, they changed accounting rules and they are allowed to book that revenue over 4 years to smooth out what happens. So, back to Call of Duty, what you've got is a company like Activision, who has very lumpy revenue. You sell this game, and the amount of playable hours in it are huge, but you only get money right up front, and then you're dealing with maintaining servers and things for long tail. So they're trying to figure out, hey, how do we get a piece of ongoing revenue? And I think the pass and pay for that sort of stuff, I think that's sort of going away. Some of the guys who are trying to do it are trying to do it to stop resale of games. So they're saying that, hey, if you buy my game new, I'm going to give you an online pass inside of my game. And if you buy it used, you've got to buy an online pass, which essentially makes up the money I lost because you didn't buy a new game in retail. There's an effort there for them to try and fight GameStop. And, GameStop's, what was last quarter? 40%, 44% of revenues were from resold games. So if you think about that, everybody who's a game publisher, they want that 40%. So they're looking at it and going, all right, that's how you want to play it. We're going to whack this in here so that we're making what we would before, and we're getting, the maximum value out of that franchise. So you have all of these things that are sort of going on as different players in the business, and things like Xbox Live, that subscription. The point for Xbox was they had to buy a bunch of servers and things like that to manage and maintain Xbox Live. They said, great, we know people like this sort of feature. We're going to do it, but we're going to charge money. And bit by bit over time, what you'll see, and which is on Sony, was those features are so important to games and converting PvP and things like that all the game developers just want those features, and the price gets shrunk down, or you add more features and things like that. I can see Microsoft getting to the point where it's reducing that rate, or you get a lot more for what you pay for Live, and that that's just that's part of the revenue stream.
All right, next one up. This one is from Irish Brood. He says, how do MMO companies or any game company like Bungie, who make games every 5 years, grow annually? In most industries, a company's success is gauged on annual growth rate, yet most MMOs historically lose active accounts annually. How is this sustainable, and why would anyone want to pursue a job in an industry company like this? It seems fundamentally flawed and little job security. Signed, want a beer with Monty, Irish Breed.
Anytime, Irish Breed, anytime. So interesting question there. So part of it is that goes back to how companies are valued. So if what you are is a small developer, you're privately held, meaning you don't trade on the stock market, what you're doing is you put a game out, you've got a spike in earnings, and what you do is you salt away money and say that, okay, this money's got to hold us for the next 2-3 years while we build the next game. If you're a developer who builds for publishers, what you have in between game launches is you're getting paid. It's how publisher financing works. You're getting paid to build that next game. So Bungie would be getting money to build the next title for Microsoft Games, if that was the case, or whoever. And that's how you pay your staff. You put a little money away on the side in case you miss a milestone or have a problem. That keeps you going. But what everybody is trying to do is you want to get that. How do you squeeze more out of the IP you've created? So by creating that online experience, by constantly adjusting, improving the game, adding content, things like that, you can take a core game and you extend its shelf life, its potential to earn, which then gives you longer run room. And I know a couple of mid-core games who are launched and are in development right now. And what they've actually found was the thinking used to be you have a team, let's say you got a team of 20, 30 people, you build one of these games, and then you cut it down to a team of 5 to 10 people who maintain it and do a little bit of content add. Mm-hmm. Well, the realization everybody's coming to is your live team actually has to be as big, or in some cases bigger, than your build team. Because once you've acquired user number one, you want to keep him for as long as you possibly can instead of having to go and find another user. And so keep that team big, keep that game interesting. I mean, CCP, they've done this forever, 2 content releases a year, always free because they want to keep the player base constantly engaged.
Always good stuff. Monty Sharma, follow him on the Twitter at Monster MONTSCER27. Forget it. If you want to send Monty a question to be featured right here on Monty's Minute, make sure to send it to Monty at Gamebreaker.tv. Monty at Gamebreaker.tv. Send them an email, send in your question, and maybe you'll see it pop up on the show. We do the show live every single week. We don't do it live. I just lied. Sometimes I just make stuff up. You can follow me on Twitter at Gary Gannon. You can follow Gamebreaker TV at Gamebreaker TV, and make sure to come over to the site all day, every day for all your video game news. Monty, always a pleasure. See you next week for our next episode.
Thanks, Gary. We'll see you.
Guys, have a great week. See you next time.